beginning.
Endless.
Ooh,
Endless.
that best.
Endless.
And Liz would.
And yeah. All right. Let us switch over to driver cam and have a story time with Liz.
Yay! It's story time with Liz, everybody.
Starlight.
You sparkle. I do. It's a zebra, because that's the thing. So after all of the desert busing, it's one of those things where like joking around is one thing, but I'm actually nervous because I'm going to tell a story that's a real story and it's personal. I thought that I had told my personal story as to why Child's Play Charity and Desert Bus is so important to me many times in the first 2 years that I've come here, but discovered this week that there are actually a few people here who have no idea that I have a story to tell, so I thought I'd tell it again. So, chat, are you ready for this? Because this is happening. So, when I was 11 years old, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer. And I had chemotherapy and I lost all of my hair. So I had 6 months of chemotherapy and 2 months of radiation. My thyroid gland doesn't work because of radiation treatment. And it sucked. And my immune system was so low that if I was hospitalized, which I was when I got sick, even if I got like a cold, I'd have to go into the hospital, I was in isolation because I couldn't be around other patients because I could get sick. So my family was fantastic and supportive, but my parents had jobs, so they couldn't be there all the time. So I spent a lot of time by myself as an 11-year-old in a hospital room with not much to do, and there wasn't much to look at because it was a hospital. It was Seattle Children's Hospital, which is actually a fantastic hospital, but it's still a hospital, so that kind of sucks. But someone had donated to the hospital a gaming console, the Super Nintendo, and I got to play video games. It was a high demand item because there was only like one on the entire floor. But because I was in isolation, I was like high on the priority list, so score. And I got to play video games, and when I heard about Child's Play and Desert Bus, I was really inspired to help out and to be a part of it because I have such fond memories of playing video games for the first time while I was in the hospital. Because when you're sick and you're a kid, it sucks, and I had no hair. So for the first part of the school year, my parents tried to keep me in school so I could have some sort of normal life, but I just got too sick, and even as a kid, like, I had no hair or eyebrows or eyelashes and had a big moon face because I was on steroids. And if you're an insecure child, being on the playground where everyone's like, what's up with the crazy looking person, it kind of makes you feel different and isolated, and you just want to be a kid and you want to play and go play with your friends, and you can't because you're too tired or too weak and you look weird and people stare at you, and the whole thing, it was all about not feeling normal. And as a child, I didn't really feel the feeling of like I could die. My parents, I'm sure for them it was horrible because they had to watch their child and they couldn't do anything, and I was sick, but I didn't feel like fearful for my life. I just felt different, and that was the part that sucked the most, is I couldn't just be a kid. But with the video games that came in, I could play video games. It wasn't exhausting. It was something I could still do, and I could, just be in the game. I could be a kid. I could, be Mario riding Yoshi, and I could save the princess, and I could, fight the bad guys and feel like I'm in this world. And it was more than just a distraction. It was like I could be an actual kid again. Oh no, I'm not gonna cry. So it was such a wonderful thing, and it was so simple because it's just a game, but it wasn't. To me, it was some sense of normalcy. It wasn't just distraction. It was like being active in life, even though it was a video game. So that is why Child's Play and Desert Bus is so important to me, is because I speak from personal experience. Like, it was a huge thing for me that somebody would take that amount of time right in the fields. That somebody would donate that, and that it makes a big difference. We sometimes think that, if we're not, I have friends who are game designers and they're wonderful people, but there's this thing where they're like, well, we're not curing cancer, we're not doing something that's contributing a huge thing to the world, we're just making games. But I mean, the difference that could make to me in my life at that time was huge. So I am fully supporting this, and I think that you all are wonderful for watching this and supporting it as well. But to know that it makes a difference, and that I can't stop chat. I can't watch you guys. So thank you. And now I'm just gonna like cry silently in the corner here.
No, group hug, group hug, group hug.
Yay! Chat hug.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, James, you're
All right, too much weight, too much weight.
Hey! Now I'm gonna go cry.
Aw.
But seriously, you guys.
Everybody. So I wrote a story about well, that's just inappropriate. I wrote a story about my experience on my website at dammitliz.com 2 years ago, and then I wrote it again last year, and actually I think it was Wired.com interviewed me as well for my story. So it's full of awesome
That's the best picture-in-picture.
But it has some awesome photos of me as a sick child. If you want to cry even more. Landscapes of emotion. So.
And as as their usernames scrolled by, they're talking about how they are in the hospital for a stem cell transplant in January, so they're going to be staying in the hospital. And any adult that's in the hospital, you're an adult, you have smartphones now, you know, and it's still boring as bus, right?
It sucks.
It's awful. So can you imagine how bad it would be to be a kid, where like everything takes 1 trillion years, right? That would be the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There needs to be more options for what is this donation for, because nothing in particular is a horrible lie. And Stranjak says, Liz, I'm a radiation therapist. I extend my condolences for all you had to go through.
Well, everyone was wonderful that I got to, I guess work with isn't the word, that was treating me. So I went to Seattle Children's Hospital for the chemotherapy and then radiation treatment at the University of Washington Hospital. And if you go to the website, I might even just go upstairs and tell bloggers what that link is, because the pictures are a little traumatizing, I've been told. Because for radiation, they made a mask that was a mold of my face so that they could strap me down to the table so I wouldn't move at all.
There's some odd pictures, yeah.
Yeah, because it needs to be exact, which is good, because we don't want to like do radiation where you don't need it. But it meant that as a squirmy child, I had to lay flat with this thing in a room by myself with huge machines on me, and it's a little scary.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it really sucked. But everyone was so nice, and I am so thankful, because that is a job I could never do. I could never. Well, there are many reasons. One, it would be hard for me to work with children who are sick all day. Like, the people who are able to do that are amazing. And the other thing is, there it is. If anyone wants to take that photo and put it on the overlay, you can all be traumatized with me.
That looks grim.
Yes, I'm alive in that photo, so you know.
That's good. Are you alive now?
Yeah.
Even better.
Hi. But yeah. So one of the things that happened as a child is that I get really sick when, like, I feel nauseous when I walk into places that have a particular cafeteria smell, because I associate the smell of the cafeteria at the hospital with the medication I was taking that made me nauseated. What's the right word?
Induces nausea.
Yeah, that works. And it was in it.
So when I was 8, I broke my leg and spent a month in the hospital. And I remember the hospital had a single NES that you had to schedule time for, and even then I knew how awesome that was.
Aww. Yeah. See, I'm not the only one.
DesertBus always makes me think of, I guess a lot of people have this stuff, but when I was a kid, I had some sickness stuff, and I had really severe tonsillitis to the point where it was cutting off my air circulation stuff. The day my parents didn't let me forget it too, because it was the night before we were supposed to go to Hawaii.
Oh.
You jerk.
Yeah. And I just I could talk normal. I would be fine, but if when I went to sleep, I would stop breathing, and then so And so I had to go into the hospital, and they took one tonsil. So I have one tonsil.
Wait, they didn't take both while they were at it?
Because I was so small and it was too dangerous. I was like 2.
Oh.
And so the only thing that I really remember about that time was, lying in bed and being bored, and being excited about there was like a toy room at the hospital. This was sort of pre-video game, but there's like a toy room. And eventually, once I got sort of good enough that I could walk around, I could go to the toy room, and there's no other kids there. And I was like, oh, that's weird, there's some other kids there. And then I realized that, like, most of the toys were, like, broken. Because it's like, Kristen and Jamie were saying, when you're budgeting for a hospital, it's really low, it's just, fundamentally, it's got to be low down on the priority list. And so, they had like some transformers and stuff there, but a lot of them were like broken and not really working properly. And so I remember being very disappointed in that.
Can I add one more feel story? And this is going to be a bad feel story. I've never been really sick as a kid. I had my tonsils out. That was fine. I was only there overnight. But I was really excited when I heard Child's Play was expanding into domestic violence shelters, because as a kid I spent some time in one, and it was the worst experience of my life, because it is a lot of people in a family shelter like that, with a lot of people you've never met before, and if you're a kid you're already scared and you're being brought in there, and there's nothing to do. There's a lot of like very scary other children in there, because it is usually ridiculous bad circumstances in life that get you ending up in a place like that. So me and my sister were like really scared and terrified and didn't have anything to do, and just sat quietly by ourselves for like the 2 weeks we were there. And it was like, if we had access to, because when you go to a domestic violence shelter, you take like the clothes on your back and like one toy, right? So the only childhood toy I have left is my like stuffed Snoopy doll, which is on the corner of our bed, still to this day. So if you like anything to amuse us, because I was like 14 and my sister was 9, would have been so much better than the 2 weeks we spent there, I can assure you. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Everyone hug Kathleen for me, because I don't want to crash the bus. Because I got
got
priorities.
My heart has turned cold and black and immune.
I am told by chat they have crashed my website, so thank you. I feel like that's a personal achievement.
So maybe if you've never spent time in a hospital, but you have spent time in a situation like that, maybe throw in a couple bucks, because I think that's a really, really fantastic cause.
Or, if you never have, I don't have any sad stories. I was really lucky. I had a great childhood. And I'm really grateful, but I kind of feel that I'm even more obligated then to help people who were just not that lucky. Because,
It's, we talked about this a little bit on the very first day when somebody mentioned the awesome games done quickly marathon or whatever.
Or done quick or.
Something like that had raised more money than we had the previous year. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a little bit of research this morning on other video game marathons that are going on around the year, not just for Child's Play, but for other charities and stuff. And that blows me away. Like the idea that this $418,000 that we've raised so far is not even is just a small percentage of the amount of generosity that's out there. That this can happen, but then there can be other charity marathons that are going on other times of the year that are making equal amounts of money. That's amazing. When you think about that it's maybe there's this same, maybe it's the same people who are donating money, I don't know, or maybe it's a totally different group of people, and there's that many people out there who really care about this stuff. And the Games Done Quick one was for cancer research, and some of them are for, there's the There's the one. There's the really huge one that goes just to like UNICEF for
the Children's Miracle Network, the extra.
Children's Miracle Network, the extra life one, which makes like millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean that's more of like a Child's Play, like distributed charity event.
It's like a crowdsourced marathons.
Yeah, like it's more like Child's Play as opposed to DesertBus. It's more sort of the overarching thing, but still it's the same thing. But the idea that the pool of money out there, the pool of generosity out there is so large that we're not competing with each other. You know, us doing well doesn't mean Mario Marathon doesn't do as well, or us doing well doesn't mean that some other video game marathon or some other charity thing doesn't do as well. That it's just adding more.
That's the best part. I love it.
That's super cool.
I love joking about friendly competition, but that's the fun part, right? It's like, it's you never like, oh, they raised more than me. It's like, wow, they raised more than me.
Woo!
That's so cool.
Spring break for the children.
So somebody hug Paul. The chat is getting really insistent. Aww. Did you bring tissues down like I said, James? Did you?
Paul, you can't.
You also never know when it's gonna affect somebody you do know. I mean, until something happens to you, you always think that you're gonna be fine, right? And you're somebody else to everybody else, and so something will eventually happen, whether it's you or someone you know. I mean, I have a previous coworker and friend who just like out of nowhere got leukemia this year, and it's just like bam. And last year when we were doing this, my mom emailed me with this story that made us all cry on the feed about how the folks in their Bible study group have a granddaughter who had just had to go into hospital for, I think it may have been leukemia as well. She was like 6 years old or something, and my mom found out that hospital back in Kansas was one that was supported by Child's Play, and it's just a little connection, It was like, wow, that's really cool. My parents are busy like in their Bible study group praying for this kid, and I'm busy doing crazy, stupid stuff on the internet and raising money, and like everything is gonna go to someone that needs it, and you might always find that there's that connection someday that you didn't know about, and you never know in the future what you might need from other people too when they'll need help.
Thank you, Gypsy Sage. That's really wonderful.
Thank you, Gypsy Sage. Saying the same thing.
I mean, what's really neat. I don't know if they talked about it this year, but what Kristen and Jamie have talked about but what I especially like about Child's Play is that there's this sort of multiplication effect, right? Like if they build one of these big console things that they're building for the domestic shelters, or if they put a Wii inside in a hospital or something, or they get a game for a hospital, that's not just helping one person, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you can spend the money to $60 or $50 or $10 or whatever is enough to buy a game, and then that game could have an effect on 200, 400, 1,000 kids who come through there every year. And that's really cool. Much more. It has much more of an effect than just here's $50 would affect somebody. Which is very cool.
And what Jamie was saying just now in the chat is that the vast majority of their donations are actually under $50. It's just someone being like, here's $20,
and that's all. But that's enough to buy whatever, like freaking batteries.
I love that quote that I love the
like
quote
it's all important.
I love the quote that Chemistry just put into the chat that joy shared is doubled and sorrow shared is halved.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Good quote.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think about that feeling of when something bad does happen, and it's never been like in hospital or something, but when something bad does happen, and you're really grateful for all your friends and your family who you have, hopefully, and some people don't have that, and you think, when those people pull through for you, you think, I want to be able to do that for somebody else. That time when I can be strong and they're not strong and they're having a hard time. How good it feels to have somebody else do that for you. You want to be part of providing that for somebody else.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah. And like I was saying, I have a hard time in hospitals because I have sometimes like emotions, just even going to my doctor, the smell of the hospital brings back a lot of emotions for me. And so I had always thought, well, maybe when I grow up, I will be the person who goes to hospitals and like encouraging other kids. And it's very traumatizing to me, understandably. So something like this is so amazing because it's silly and it's fun, but I'm able to contribute and to help that child that's sort of the new me who's in that situation where they just want to play video games. I had a point where I had no white blood cells when I was ill, so I had no immunity, I had no defense, and so they had to do a blood transfusion, which looking back on this as an adult, like that's dramatic and scary, and my parents must have been going through so much. But for me, it was like they have this bag of blood that they want to put in my body, and that's weird and kind of gross. But then they sort of like hid it, and then I played video games, and it was great. I mean, it was once I got the tube around the controller.
You got super blood.
Exactly, I got super blood.
That must be
Horse
awful
blood.
for a kid, because when they do a blood transfusion, the needle they have to use is humongous, because if you use a small needle, it breaks up the red blood cells.
Oh yeah.
And I can only imagine how painful that must have been.
Well, and I had because of the chemo, the chemotherapy, and I am thankful. I feel I'm a part of a lot of studies actually, because it's been over 10 years since I had my treatment, so it's obviously improved over the years. But in order to get the chemotherapy into my system, because to do it in my veins would actually burn up my veins because it was so intense. I had a portacath put in, so it looked kind of like a stethoscope that they could inject, and then the tube went to my heart to pump the medicine around my body. And the needle, I called it a nail because it was like a hook and it was huge. I mean, maybe like a nail, and it would be. They'd have to change it. And I feel like such a wuss, even like talking about like 11-year-old me was like so hardcore to go through all this, because in the middle of the night, the size of the needle I had wasn't quite right, and so it would go out a little bit from where it was being. But then the IV wouldn't flow because it didn't have full contact, and so then it would beep. And if it did that, the nurse would come in and they'd have to like take it out and re-stick it in. But I hated that. So in the night, I would if it did that, I'd be like punching myself in the chest to try to get it back in because I didn't want them to come and mess with me. It was horrible.
That sounds awful.
It was awful.
I'm an adult that's had needles, like IV needles put in, and it's like.
Yeah, those are so cool. I love those. Have you seen those?
I
They're great.
I do that. It's amazing.
I don't know. We actually, it just occurred to me. We do this for the kids, but I think we do it for the parents too. If you were a parent of a kid like that, God, your world would be a mess. Especially if there are other kids in your family already as well that you're trying to still raise in some kind of normalcy, and you can't do anything about it as a parent, but you can't give your kid a normal life. And I don't know. I think parents in that situation need like all the support available in the world and all the help.
Well, also like just the family in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, a lot of people saying in the chat that just the toys and games that they donated not only help the sick kid, but they make having family time, possible sometimes in these situations.